Remember 2009 when Apple released that commercial saying, "There's an app for that"? Well, a lot has happened since then. For years, museums have been told that custom apps are the future of visitor engagement. Institutions spend tens of thousands of euros hoping their guides will be used by visitors. But here's the shocking truth. Over 97% of visitors ignore those apps entirely. Imagine a busy museum lobby. Hundreds of visitors excited to explore with their smartphones in hand, and yet almost none of them are using the official app. Today I'll show you what the data says, why it happens, and what museums can do to actually reach their audience. Hi, I'm Therese from Nubart, and I help museums design digital visitor experiences that really work. In our recent study, we analyzed 175 museum apps across Europe and the US, from large national museums to smaller regional attractions. The results were surprising and frankly alarming. In this video, we'll explore how visitors really interact with museum apps, why most of these apps fail to reach their goals, and what approaches produce dramatically better engagement. By the end, you will have a clear picture of what works and what doesn't when it comes to digital audio guides. Let's start with the numbers. We studied 175 official museum and monument apps in countries like France, Austria, Germany, Spain, and the US. And these were apps that museums actively promoted via signage, brochures, websites, staff recommendations. The result is shocking. Only 2.47% of visitors download the official app. To put that into perspective, if a museum sees 10,000 visitors in a year, only around 247 will even attempt to download the app. And that's before considering people who never open it, uninstall immediately, or run into technical issues. Real engagement is likely even lower. Only one example in our study, Museum Barberini in Potsdam, achieved 20% adoption. And that was no ordinary app. That was a full digital ecosystem with indoor navigation, AI-generated soundscapes, polished UX, frequent updates, and extensive multimedia content. This example shows that high adoption is possible, but only with massive investment and continuous maintenance. For the vast majority, adoption hovers near 2 to 3%. Now let's talk about how we gathered this data, because credibility matters. App selection. We chose 175 official apps promoted directly by the museums themselves across Europe and the US. Apple does not provide any public information about app downloads, but Google does. You can find this information here. Google provides this information in a logarithmic progression. For our analysis, we used the average value as the number of downloads in Android. We took into account that iPhone penetration is different in the United States than in Europe. We used statistical data to find a multiplier that would allow us to transfer the data we averaged for Android to iPhones. Visitor statistics. We gathered annual visitor numbers from tourism boards, museum reports, and official statistics. Time normalization. We adjusted for each app's launch date to estimate yearly downloads. Wondering where you can find this information? It's a little hidden, but I'll show you so you can do your own analysis. Just click on the arrow next to About this app and then look for the release date. Don't confuse it with the date of the last update though. Adoption equals total estimated installs divided by annual visitors times 100. We deliberately used conservative assumptions. The 2.47% figure is a best case scenario. Real usage is almost certainly lower. Because the apps span different countries and multiple institutions, this dataset provides a broad and representative picture of how museum apps perform in practice. So why is adoption so low? It's not because visitors dislike museums or because apps have bad content. The problem is structural. There is just too much friction. Visitors have to find the correct app in the App Store, they have to download it, maybe they have to accept permissions, and then they also have to open it and navigate the interface. And all of this while being in a crowded lobby, maybe having to manage children or luggage or rushing through a tour. Most visitors simply don't bother. Also, there is high cost and low return. Museums spend tens of thousands developing, maintaining, and translating apps, often across iOS and Android. Adoption rarely exceeds 3%. So what's the takeaway? Requiring a download introduces friction that dramatically reduces engagement. So what does it mean? It means for most museums, native apps are not the most effective tool for engaging visitors. If your goal is to increase engagement, rich storytelling, multilingual interpretation, or accessibility, a download requirement might work against you. Instead, museums should focus on frictionless, visitor-first solutions. Progressive web apps or web-based audio guides are increasingly popular. But what are PWAs? They are websites that behave like apps but don't require downloading, letting visitors access content instantly via QR code or a link. So why do they work? Because they work with any device on any operating system. They also work offline. Content updates are immediate. They are easier and cheaper to maintain. Visitors simply scan a QR code and start listening. No download, no friction. From our experience, these solutions achieve way higher engagement because they remove barriers that stop visitors from participating. Imagine a family with 2 kids visiting a museum. Instead of struggling to download an app, they simply scan a QR code at the entrance and get immediate access to content in their language. That's the kind of frictionless experience that actually works. Native apps aren't inherently bad, but for many institutions, they simply fail to deliver meaningful engagement. Especially if you want a digital audio guide that actually reaches visitors, focuses on ease of use, accessibility, and minimal friction, an app might not be the best solution. Remember the Apple commercial from 2009? Well, maybe sometimes in the museum world there isn't really an app for that. In many cases, the best solution is to skip the app entirely. At Nubart, we help museums design digital guides that visitors actually use. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with your colleagues in the museum and heritage world.